Welcome back to This Is Working. I'm Dan Roth, LinkedIn's editor-in-chief. On this show, we talk to leaders who have a significant impact on how we work and how we live. Today, our guest is Ryan Gellert. When Ryan Gellert became CEO of Patagonia in September 2020, he took over a role that his predecessor had used to shape the company into a voice for change. Patagonia had always been vocal about protecting the planet, but under former CEO Rose Macario, it became known for taking on issues ranging from the social safety net to voting rights. But nothing has grabbed the spotlight like what Patagonia's founder announced in September. He declared that he was giving away his ownership stake of the business, a company worth $3 billion, to a nonprofit to fight climate change. Now Gellert is tasked with leading his employees through this transformational change. Brian, welcome to This Is Working.
Hey, Dan, great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great having you here. So would love to just start off with a sense of what's going on in the economy. I think there are a lot of questions we all have about whether it's holding up. What are you seeing in terms of the consumer? Are they spending? Are they changing how they spend?
I think it's both. I think that, it's really interesting when we think about the last couple of years, the whole economy sort of ground to a halt for a minute, and then it seemed like it was turbocharged, and some channels like e-com were racing ahead. Retail, wholesale were really slow and sluggish, and then it flipped. There's been these headwinds in e-com kind of around the world for the last 12 plus months, whereas retail has outperformed anything that we had expected. And so there's just been this, every time you think one thing's happening, it seems like it moves in a slightly different direction. And then behind the scenes, of course, there's been all the supply challenges that there's been. So I think it's been a really dynamic period in general. What we're feeling now is, I think the leading edge of a recession. And so we're seeing continual kind of headwinds in e-com. Retail continues to perform pretty well. And then with our wholesale accounts who are committing to orders pretty far in front, we're just seeing a lot of slowing down, and particularly in our industry, the outdoor space. I think hard goods, people have just loaded up on those in the last couple of years. And I think the fact that those categories are generally slowing is putting a lot of pressure on our wholesale accounts open to buy across categories. So in short, we're seeing things slow down, and that's how we're managing the business in response.
So how do you manage that response?
Yeah, we start bringing down our forecasts. We adjust our cost structure where we can. We continue to be very focused on investing in the things that we believe are critically important, and that's innovation in product, and that's in minimizing the footprint of our business, primarily through our product, and continuing to invest in our people. And so those things we're going to work really hard to protect. There are other areas, whether it be marketing or elsewhere, we've got to look to just kind of slow the pace down a bit.
And one more question about the economy. Are you seeing this globally? Are there pockets of strength somewhere or different spending in different countries?
I'd say it's more of a global trend, although certainly on a weekly basis, you see different performance elsewhere. We're a very global business. We've got operations, stores, people, in Australia and in Korea, Japan, across the European continent, Chile, Argentina, Canada, here in the US. And so we've got a business that does kind of run around the planet. And I think through COVID, we saw things kind of pop up and down in different places, depending on primarily on the status of the pandemic. And I think now we're seeing, it sort of level off and work more consistently than we've seen in a couple of years, probably more like it did going into the pandemic. But, week to week, it's a pretty dynamic world. I think the one area, no surprise, that's particularly challenging, and we're actually performing well, but I'm just really concerned about the next 12 to 24 months is Europe. Inflation there is higher in many countries than it is here in the US. It's been awfully high here. And as we head into winter, the energy crisis, the cost of and the availability of is a real concern for our people and our communities there.
Yeah, I know a lot of business leaders are saying the same things. Leaders in Europe wondering how they're going to get through this and changing how they're running the businesses as they think about energy in particular. So very interesting to hear you say that. There has been such tremendous focus on Patagonia in the last few months, particularly around how you've changed your operating or ownership model. Would you mind walking us through the changes and exactly what they mean?
Yeah, I mean, anybody that knows Yvon Chouinard, who is the founder and former owner of Patagonia, knows that he's a pretty reluctant businessman. And so probably would find it as no surprise that for decades he's really asked himself the question, what's the end game with Patagonia for me, for my family? Do we sell it at some point? Do we take it public? Do we do some version of an equity transformation to put the money to work? And I think that they've thought about that off and on for decades. And over the last couple of years, it became very clear that this was now the time for them to answer this question. And it was a real tension between wanting to use the business and its resources and its value to fight the climate and ecological crisis right now in much more meaningful ways than we've been able to. And also, I think, still believing that the business can be a model for a different version of business within a capitalist system. And so, if you sell part, if you sell all of it, if you take it public, can you have it both ways? And so, we explored the full range of options. And ultimately, what we distilled our list of desires down to is how can we continue to run an independent Patagonia with the values that the Chouinards have embedded within it, and also use much more money right now to fight the climate and ecological crisis. And so what we did was create a new structure. And it is pretty complicated when you get down into all the sort of details of it, but I think the concept's really simple. We created a purpose trust, which governs the purpose of the business. So it decides who's on the board, and it can remove anybody from the board. So in essence, in addition to our benefit corporation commitments, B Corp commitments that are codified in our articles, we now have this other mechanism to ensure that anybody that is leading the company, and that's the board of directors, that's the CEO and others, are staying true to the mission of Patagonia. So that's the first piece of this. The second piece is a collective of 501c4s that will receive dividends annually of the profits of the company, and they will put that money to work fighting the climate and ecological crisis. So in simple form, we've created two entities, one to make sure we stay on track, the other to put the money to work. And we have the opportunity now to continue to run this business according to our values, which is all we've ever wanted to do, and is what I would argue is the biggest impact that Patagonia can have.
So how does it change how the company operates, if at all?
I don't think it changes, people. So one of the things I've been really focused on since September 14th, so it's about 60 days now, is getting in front of every one of our 3,600 people around the world and having Q&A sessions, because on September 14th, we rolled this out to our employees and provided a lot of context and information. And then we knew there were going to be a lot of questions that came up. And one of those that was going to be top of mind was the question you asked: what does this mean for me? How does this change my job? And, I think in 60 days, I don't think anybody's job, I don't think how we run the business or anybody's job within it has changed at all. I like to think of it as, mentally sort of using your mind. The job remains very much the same as it has been before. In your heart, I hope that people feel differently about what they do, in some ways, perhaps big and perhaps small for others. But I think what we've really done, and this is the piece that I hope continues to resonate more and more as we operationalize this with and for our people, is that we have now tied our financial value really directly to our values. And I think that's really what we've accomplished with this new structure.
So it doesn't change how you operate. Does it change at all how you hire or who you're able to hire?
I think it's created a lot of interest in careers at Patagonia. And so I think it's, in a marketplace that's been very competitive, we have had a lot more interest in every position that we've posted. So I certainly think we've seen that. As far as, the kind of people that we want to bring into the organization, again, I don't think this changes that. I think what we've always been looking for are, number one, of course, people who can do the job for which we're seeking to fill. And number two, people that just demonstrate kind of an intellectual curiosity and an interest in being part of something bigger than themselves, and really contributing to that. And so, one of the questions I always find most important, and it may sound really simple, but I don't think it is, particularly with senior roles, is why Patagonia? And if the answers are about living and working in Southern California or leaving a job that they feel like they've gone as far in as they care to go, those aren't real compelling answers and reasons for why you want to be a part of this thing that we do.
That's super interesting. I want to give some shout outs to people who are joining from the stream. So we have hellos from Zoe from the UK, Jack from Canada, Chester from Texas, Eva from Barcelona, and Sharif from Egypt. So people all over the world joining in. Really interesting for you to say that you are not looking for people who are saying, "Look, I've reached as far as I can go in my career. I want to try something different." When you are hiring, what are some of the questions that you're asking?
One of the first, well, I should say sometimes it's the first question. It's always for me the most important question is why this opportunity at Patagonia, and I try to keep that question deliberately open ended. But I think in the first 30 seconds, I think you get a really clear sense of what's brought the two of us together in this conversation. And I think about a senior IT role that we were desperate to fill about 18 months ago, and we ended up keeping that role open for about, I don't know, I think over a year. And it was pretty painful for us to run with that role open for that long. But we met candidate after candidate that had just impeccable CVs as far as their work experience. But really, we're struggling to articulate why is this the opportunity that I'm really passionate about. And so we kept that role open until we found the right person. And I think that's, going through the punch list of technical skills and experiences is obviously a critical part of it. But I'm rarely, if ever, involved in that part of the conversation. But really understanding who somebody is, what motivates them, and ultimately why they want to be a part of this, I think to me, is one of the most critical aspects.
One of the things that your chairman, I believe it was, said when this announcement was made was, "This is not woke capitalism. It's the future of business." I was surprised to see that term woke capitalism. Was that a deliberate choice? What does that mean? What are you pushing back against?
I don't know the quote that I'm guessing if it was our chairman, it was Charles. I don't remember
Exactly. It was
exactly that
Charles
quote,
Tom.
but I don't know what the hell that term means. I mean, it gets thrown around a lot. I don't know that it even existed before, say, 24 months ago. I think if anybody, and we get this leveled at us all the time, if it's woke capitalism to care deeply about your people, care deeply about the planet we live on, use your business, your voice, work with your people, create opportunities for people to be engaged, and use your financial resources to have an impact on the things that you feel are most important to all of us. Then I guess we're a woke group of capitalists, but I think it's a pretty hollow term, and yeah, I think what our place in the world is, and I say this with great humility, I don't think that we're going to be able to change this all by ourselves. It's quite clear that we won't, but I think, what's unique about Patagonia is not that we might be in a position to give $100 million away. It's not the eco innovation that we've pioneered and open sourced over our 49-year history. It's not any single thing that we have done. I think instead it's just modeling a different version of a business operating unapologetically as a for-profit business and being able to operate from the business sector. We're not a government, we're not an NGO, we're a for-profit business, and being able to model a different path forward, I think that's the biggest impact we've had in our 49-year history. And I think the more important question is, we near our 50-year anniversary and we look at the world we live in and we project out into the future what our biggest concerns are, what the biggest opportunities are. I think it's still the same thing. It's continuing to model what I'd like to believe is a more progressive version of business in a world that desperately needs that.
So, talk more about that modeling, because I know that there are, especially in these times, if you are a leader, you're a CEO, you're in the C suite, you're looking around for examples of how you could be running your company. You're trying to figure out how people are going back to work, how they are handling these political environments they're in, how they're handling wars and supply chain issues. So I know
Mhm.
there's a lot of discussions among leaders where they're saying, like, how are you doing it? How can I learn about how to apply this to my business? Have
Right.
you had CEOs or senior leaders reach out to you or to the family saying, should we be thinking about this? This is, I think a lot of people have questions about running as a B Corp. That seems to
Mhm.
now people understand how to run that. This is taking governance to a new level, or understanding how to apply profits in a way that have, an impact on the globe. Are you getting people coming to you saying, how can I use this in my company?
Yeah, we are. And, I think you cataloged it pretty well. There's different ways, different levels of commitment that companies can make. And I recognize that each of them, certainly the model we've put in place is not a realistic alternative or option for a lot of businesses, public companies in particular. But I think it does. I think what the structure we've put in place and the fact that we're very intentional in kind of talking about it, I think is intended to do a couple of things. One is just to expand the possibility and the conversation about what can be done. I think it is really kind of front staged the topic of what is the responsibility of business and what are the opportunities for business to participate in bigger and more impactful ways. The reality, as I see it, is this: we are living at the leading edge of the climate and ecological crisis. I think it's an existential threat to us as humans. It's one of our own creation. And I think we have moved past the point of no return on saying, well, this is a government issue to solve. Governments have proven incapable of doing that. Individual citizens, through individual actions, will never be capable of doing that. And so I think what we need is all the tools available. So that's government doing what it was founded to do, solve the biggest problems that we face. It's individuals taking accountability through the role of as part of civil society and also in their individual decisions, including their buying decisions. And it's companies stepping up and taking a greater amount of responsibility for the impact that we have in the world. I think that's the only way that we'll be able to solve the issues that we've created.
We've got some more hellos coming in. Jennifer from Oregon, Kurt from Virginia. Vivek says, great to hear the Patagonia story from you, Ryan. I want to take a question from Rick Evans, who says, one of the most direct ways people can make an environmental difference is through their diet. What does the future of Patagonia provisions look like?
Yeah, that's the reason that we started a food business, and it's a small business compared to the bigger apparel and equipment business. But the reason we started a food business is because we believe exactly as was stated, and it's not just the diet, but it's the way that the agricultural sector works, in our opinion. We look at supply chains that are broken in our clothing, our apparel and equipment business, and we say, how can we make them less broken? But I think we've really struggled to find ways, with a couple of rare exceptions, where you can actually take a supply chain and make it a part of the solution within apparel and equipment. In food, that's really different. Regenerative organic agriculture is an opportunity to actually create healthy topsoil and in the process sequester atmospheric carbon. And so that's the reason that we are participating in this space. That's the reason that we co-founded with Dr. Bronner's and the Rodell Institute, the Regenerative Organic Alliance. That's the reason that we're pioneering regenerative organic cotton for our apparel supply chain in India and Peru. And that's the reason that we started our provisions business. So to answer the question directly, we're at an inflection point with the provisions business, really rethinking some of the things that have worked, some of the things that haven't worked, and asking ourselves, how do we scale the solutions that we're feeling most passionate about? And one of the ones amongst many that we really feel we're onto something is Kernza, which is a long root alternative to wheat and other more widely used grains in the human diet. And so we've pioneered the use of Kernza in beer, for instance, and also in some other food products. And so that's something that we're going to continue to push on.
I'd love to understand how you run the company while also keeping up with all of the changes in politics and in science around in giving back to the planet or new grains. I mean, I would think it's enough to be the CEO and be like, all right, I've got to manage these supply chains. I've got to manage these P&Ls. I've got to understand where we're going. I've got to handle my forecast. But you're also talking about working with scientists around understanding how food supply chains are going to work, where to invest in saving the planet, what governments are doing. That seems like a lot to handle. Can you just talk a little bit about how you do your research, how you keep up, and sort of how you divvy up your day?
Yeah, I think I think the short answer, well, I guess the short answer is two things: imperfectly and with a lot of passion. I mean, I think that these are topics that I just have just an insatiable sort of appetite to understand. I think intellectually they're just so unbelievably interesting. I think the answer to the question, though, honestly, is being surrounded by incredibly smart and passionate people. And so on every topic that we engage in, we've got expertise buried within the organization, and they are also leaning on and working with people outside of the organization. And so I think that's where our best ideas come from. That's what ultimately I'm able to sort of get distilled and explained to me often by people much smarter than myself, internally and externally. I think for me personally, it does just come down to I just find all of this incredibly fascinating. I think the tension for me personally is making sure that I'm really focused on the business, and it's not just the financial performance of the business and the strategies of the business. I think in the last couple of years, it's increasingly been the need to really ensure that we're taking care of our people. And that comes in a variety of ways, including in communication and just spending a lot of time in two-way conversation with all of our people, one-on-one, small groups, large town halls, and otherwise, and doing as much of that as possible in person, which has also been particularly challenging in the last couple of years. How do I spend my day? It's, I try to get going early and I generally go pretty late and keep this thing going kind of 7 days a week. And just moving, but it's pretty all over the place as far as the topics. Yesterday it was a 3-hour call with the government of Albania working on this national park that we're seeking to create around. It would be Europe's first free-flowing river national park around the Vjosa that goes from the border of Greece across Albania to the Adriatic Sea. And then immediately from there, going into interviews with candidates and then into board discussions on a host of other topics. And so it is a lot of sort of nimbleness intellectually, but it's the best part of the job.
Speaking of Albania, you spent the 6 years before you became CEO as running Patagonia's EMEA business, Europe, Middle East, Africa.
Mm-hmm.
What is that international experience or living outside the US? What does that bring to you in this current role? And do you recommend having that kind of non-US experience or leaving your country of origin as a way to be better at business?
Yeah, I've done that twice in my career. I spent 5 years living and working in China with a former company, and then I spent 6 years, as you mentioned, based in Amsterdam, but looking after a portfolio that was across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I think both those experiences were some of the most transformational of my career. In both of those experiences, I was kind of in GM roles, and so I had broad responsibility. I think the two things that I took away from those experiences, both of which I think are really foundationally important in this role. One is just seeing the world, seeing the business that you're a part of, seeing the industry, seeing the sports that you're a part of through a different lens from a different part of the world and through other people's eyes. In the case of the experience with Patagonia and being in Europe, that also included seeing a broad set of issues and topics around sustainability, the climate and ecological crisis through the prism of other cultures. And I thought that was really valuable. Understanding that I think the tempo, as imperfect as it is in fighting the climate and ecological crisis, is probably being set in Europe, not here in America or North America. I think the other lesson that I learned that I really believe has been foundationally important for me is when you're operating, and I'll use Europe as an example, if you're walking into a room with your leadership team and you are having conversations on distribution strategies across the European continent, by definition, I will never know as much or have as much experience as my head of sales, who is a European, or on people and culture issues, same statement, or on marketing issues, same statement, or on operational issues. And so you've got to get pretty comfortable very quickly in having the least amount of expertise of anybody in the room, arguably, on almost every single topic you're talking about. And I think it brings a certain amount of humility. I think it requires a certain amount of humility. It also requires constantly asking yourself, where do I add value? What is my role in this setting? And I think first and foremost, it's creating culture and contributing to that, creating a space where all of our people can build culture. I think it means finding the best ideas and championing them and moving them forward. And I think ultimately, and this is a never-ending job, it means really creating a sense of team. And a team, in my opinion, has never been about creating, a collection of talent. A team is a team. It's a team as people coming together with a shared vision and sacrificing and flexing for that vision, even their own interests.
And were you always good at that, or is that something you've had to learn? That kind of humility, that accepting that other people are the experts in the room.
I'm a pretty introverted and humble person. I'd like to think. Sometimes people describe me as confident, which always seems really dissonant with how I feel about myself. But I don't think that part of it's been difficult. I think I've learned a lot about how to manifest that in a leadership role where you're actually adding value and pushing things forward. But finding that balance between being decisive and providing leadership where you feel it's needed and also stepping back and allowing that to come up in other ways. So I think I'm as imperfect as anybody at that.
Great. Couple questions coming in about your marketing strategy. Lise and Inge both want to know how you think about marketing and what you look for.
I think in marketing, we don't really think about marketing in a very traditional sense. I mean, we do some product and categorical marketing that might look a little bit similar to traditional marketing, but that's not really much of what we're engaged in. We don't do a lot of paid advertising. I think what we seek to talk about are the values and how they manifest themselves, our values and how they manifest themselves in the business or in product. We try to talk a lot about the performance aspects of product coupled with kind of the footprint innovation that we work really hard to institutionalize in everything that we do. And we also spend a lot of our time, money, voice, and otherwise just kind of front staging the work of partners and grantees that we have relationships with. So that's really how we think about kind of broad communications. And it's always this, we're a for-profit business and we've got to figure out how to cover all of our costs to do the work that we do. I think that there is a real need for us to continue to make product that people want and provide service that people appreciate and respect. And at the same time, that really is in conflict with our concerns around growth and our concerns around making too much product and putting too much product in the world. So that's one of those many contradictions that we wrestle with often here at Patagonia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting things when you listen to Patagonia talk and your marketing messages, this idea of recycling and of reusing and of continuing to use product versus, and while you're a company, as you say, that needs to keep selling and keep growing. So what are those discussions like?
I think that it is a contradiction. And so I think if anybody thinks we've distilled it down to here's the answer, it just doesn't seem, we haven't found that answer. I think what we have found is a set of values, and what we have invested in consistently are ways to bring those values to life. And so it's not just about saying these are the things that are important to us. And these are the ways that we're investing in that. And so when I think about Black Friday and all the sort of other days that have names now that follow that, from Friday to Sunday that weekend, our focus is going to be on doing repair events and repairing product, but also teaching our community and customers to do product repair themselves from Friday to Sunday. And then on the Monday that follows, we're going to be focused. We're actually doing our first ever sale on wornwear.com, which is the sale of secondhand products. So product will be available at roughly probably 70% or so below its original full price. And this is, again, secondhand product. And then on that Tuesday, we're going to front stage all the work that our grantees are doing and create awareness and opportunities for people to participate through skilled volunteering on Patagonia Action Works and petitioning and showing up at events and other things in that space. And so that's really how we're thinking about this upcoming period of time. And those are examples of the kind of programs that we continue to invest in. Repair is something that has been a foundational part of Patagonia for decades. We've got over 100 people at our Reno repair center working full time on product repair. And we've got a big footprint in Japan, another big footprint in Europe and other parts of the world where we have a business. And so that's an example of something. It's not just an idea or a story, but it's a scaled part of our business. And in that example, it's a cost center.
Very different approach to Black Friday and the days after that. One more question coming from Lars Reese, who wants to know how you think about opening up stores in this slowing environment.
Lars, I'm guessing that's Lars from Denmark. It might be somebody I know. How do we think about opening stores in this environment? I think in Europe, I think we could benefit from a few more stores, and in some markets, we actually have a pretty small retail footprint. So regardless of the fact that this is kind of a tightening marketplace, we'll continue to make investments there. We'll probably be a bit more conservative here in the US. Ultimately, we're just conservative with our footprint of retail stores. We want every store to be kind of a gift to the local community. We really prioritize unique spaces with unique histories, removing more material often than adding. And where we use materials, flooring and others, we local source recycled and refurbished materials. That's a big part of our strategy. But as a result of all that, every retail store that we operate anywhere around the world is pretty unique. We don't have a playbook we have a set of values again here on kind of how we think about retail, but we don't have a playbook on how we open retail stores. And as a result, we've got a pretty small global retail footprint.
Love to finish off every interview with the same question, which is about career advice. So many of us are looking for answers on how to get ahead, whether you're starting at your job or whether you've been in it for a while. Is there something you tell people when they're starting off or when they try to figure out how to have a path like you've had?
I always I have to give a disclaimer anytime I'm offering career advice. I did a 4-year degree, then I did a master's degree in MBA in business. And the first real job I had was working in a warehouse at a company called Black Diamond Equipment in Salt Lake City. And I did that, for probably $5 or $6 an hour because I really wanted to work in the climbing industry. I grew up in Florida where I was really inspired by, and I wasn't really a surfer myself. I surf a bit, but my brother was an aspiring professional surfer, and people I grew up around were really passionate about it. And what I saw were a bunch of people who were able to forge careers tied to their passion, and that always really had an impact on me. And so when I started rock climbing, I was dead set on trying to do the same because I felt like that was a sport I was going to spend the rest of my life doing. So first job I had was working in a warehouse. I'm not sure I would suggest that everybody do exactly the same, but I think what I have always really tried to do, and I do think this is pretty good advice, find things that you're passionate about and be relentless in pursuing those things and learn at every step along the way. I think prior to working at Black Diamond, probably some of the best learnings I had professionally were waiting tables. I was pretty introverted and quiet, and forcing myself to engage with people that looked like they had done pretty well in life and were pretty successful was, pushed me to the edge of my comfort zone and taught me probably as much as almost any professional experience I've had. But I think it's just really absorbing as many lessons as you can at everything you do, figure out what you're really passionate about and pursue it with the kind of passion that it deserves if you're really, really serious about wanting to create not just a career for yourself that provides for yourself and your family, but something that you just love getting out of bed every day and doing.
Well, certainly was a thread running through this whole interview was the idea of making sure your passions and values line up and pursuing both of them. So this has been terrific. I want to wrap up with some quotes or some feedback from people in the feed. Gary says, I volunteered with the Sugar Pine Foundation in Lake Tahoe. Thanks to Patagonia website's calendar, I planted trees in the Caldera fire. Serena says Patagonia has been the beacon of certified B Corps. Keep up. Kudos to constantly and clearly leading the way on the triple bottom line. Boris says, for sure, Ryan is a modern leader you wish to work with and learn from. And Paul says, a climate action fellow at Paul, who's a climate action fellow at AmeriCorps, says, you're my hero, Ryan. Keep up the good work. Our people and planet, thank you and Patagonia. I hope to work for Patagonia one day. So Ryan, a lot of great feedback from people. Thank you so much for joining us today on This Is Working.
Dan, thanks a ton. Thanks to everybody for participating. And thank you so much to all of our team members around the world. Really appreciate it.
All right. We release each episode of This Is Working as a podcast. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can get more advice from the world's top leaders by subscribing to my newsletter using the link you see right there on the screen. I'm Dan Roth. Thank you for watching This Is Working. I'll see you soon.